I would like to thank you for attending Northeastern University's Global Summit. This year's theme is the Global Emerging Markets. We would like to tell you why we chose this theme. We feel as though this year it's important to recognize all the new emerging markets, and we would like to thank our speakers for taking time out of their days to come and give us what will hopefully, and we know will be, fantastic presentations. We would also like to thank all the people that helped us. We have our global leadership team. If you guys could please stand. We would also like to thank our administrator advisor, Ann Benware, our academic advisor, Ravi Ramamurthy, who unfortunately is not here today. We'd also like to thank Wells Fargo and the DeMoore McKim University School of Business for helping us and supporting us in everything we're doing today. So at this time, I would like to introduce Dean Hugh McCourtney from the DeMoore McKim School of Business.
Well, thanks everyone, and welcome. I'm extremely delighted to be here this morning, particularly since I think of this event as being quintessentially Northeastern, and at least three elements that make this a signature event for Northeastern, for me anyway. And first and foremost is because it is student-led. We take that for granted here at Northeastern, but it's remarkably unique at both universities. Most big conferences, meetings, curricula, ideas would be driven by the faculty and staff only at universities. That's not the way we do things here. It's part of our commitment to experiential learning. This is your collective ideas, your agenda, your invites, your logistics, and I think that's tremendous. It's quintessentially Northeastern, and I couldn't be more proud of that approach to education. Second, it's global. As you well know, that we are particularly known for our global experiential learning and our commitment to educating students from all across the globe, and importantly, giving them exposure to different parts of the globe. And we do that in many different dimensions, including in our research mission, for instance, in the Center of Emerging Markets, which is one of the leaders in the world under Professor Ramamurthy's leadership. And it's one of the main strategic priorities of the DeMoore McKim School of Business is to continue to grow both our research, our teaching, and our outreach globally. The third thing is that at Northeastern, we focus on the intersection of theory and practice, concepts and practice. That's the way we think is the best way to learn. If you just learn concepts but don't understand how they apply in context, you really haven't learned that much. And by the way, you can't really learn that much in context if you don't have a conceptual framework to make sense of the world around you. And I really like what you've done today in bringing together academic thought leaders, business leaders, students, and others with different perspectives, because I think the best learning comes from combining those different perspectives. That's certainly our educational model here at Northeastern. So, in my mind, quintessentially Northeastern, and that means great ingredients for learning today. And again, I'm very thankful and proud of all of you that put this together. With special thanks, of course, to Wells Fargo, our sponsor today. This tremendous commitment. Our distinguished speakers spending their time with us today. And last, again, but not least, our student leaders who have been driving this, and my colleague, Ann Benware, who's provided such terrific counseling and consulting along the way on this. So with that, without further ado, let's get into the great day. And congratulations on making a great choice to be here today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dean Courtney, for those remarks. I know you guys didn't come here to hear me talk, so I'm going to be pretty brief. Our first speaker has over 20 years of experience assisting U.S. exporters in penetrating overseas markets. He is currently serving as the director of the U.S. Commercial Service in the Department of the Chamber of Commerce. Did I get that? Did I get all that? Okay. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Jim Paul.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Is that too loud? Everybody hear me okay? Okay. First of all, as I mentioned to Jake Moody and the Dean as well, extremely impressive in terms of how well run this conference is today. We go to a lot of various international trade events, and so we're speakers really all across Boston and Massachusetts, and this was really one of the best well-organized event that we've had. So thank you very much for inviting me, including me today. So I'm Jim Paul, the director of the Boston office of the U.S. Commercial Service, a division of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And our role is to really assist organizations with exporting. So we're a U.S. federal government agency, and we have offices around the country and overseas. And really what we do is we assist companies with exporting their products for any types of manufactured items or services as well. And we, as part of our role, we're also here to fulfill President Obama's, his National Export Initiative, which had a goal in the first 5 years to double exports. We work with a number of various other federal agencies and state partners from Massachusetts, the region of New England, and really across the United States, a lot of industry associations, and other types of partners. I'll mention some of those later. And what we do is our main goal is really to connect organizations to international opportunities. And I'll detail how we do so. Really, the two main areas which I'm going to focus my remarks on this morning are really about an emerging markets overview, and also our services and those of some of our partners. So that way, any company, so that way you're aware in terms of what the resources are. But I'd like to keep this interactive. So this is obviously your conference. You've done a fantastic job. So please feel free at any time if you have any questions, any comments, please go ahead and let me know. Jake has my slides, so feel free to certainly share those as well with anyone who would like them. But any points, any comments, something that you've learned or you've studied, I would like to get your take as well. So just to give a little more background in terms of who we are first, before I get into the emerging markets section. So we have offices around the country. So we have 100 offices in the United States. Our Boston office, we're right in the JFK Federal Building and Government Center. Our office here, we work with any type of organization exporting throughout Massachusetts. But we also have offices in each of the 6 New England states, New York, New Jersey, and we cover all 50 states, including the U.S. territories as well. And really in those offices, our role is to meet with companies interested in exporting who are already exporting, let them know what the resources are, and then we offer assistance, which I'll go through later. We help organizations really at any stage of the process. So when we're talking about emerging markets, sometimes it might just be a one-person operation, or we also work with companies that have over tens of thousands of employees, and maybe they're already in 50 or 60 markets, but they haven't really tapped into some of the other emerging market opportunities. So that's where we are to help. And again, what our role is really through our overseas offices, is we almost a liaison role here. We'll help companies as much as we can on this end from the US side, and then we'll connect them to our overseas colleagues. And so our overseas offices, where we have 140 offices overseas in 72 different markets, we have rotating US officers that are there about 2 to 5 years before they get too comfortable, before they get shipped off to another market. But they supervise the locals that we hire from that area. For example, Brazil. Obviously, almost everyone considers that a tremendous emerging market, one of the BRIC countries. And so we have offices in Brasilia, Sao Paulo, Rio, Belo Horizonte, and Recife. And so we have US officers that are supervising the local staff. Those local staff are generally from those areas. So they generally grew up there, they've done business there, they speak Portuguese. They're different than us in the sense that they concentrate in various industries. So they're really there in terms of a cultural perspective, but also to help companies tap into the opportunities. because they're very knowledgeable, for example, healthcare, biotech, medical devices, that they may have contacts not just with distributors and other partners in that area, let's say in Sao Paulo, but also with the Ministry of Health and the major medical trade associations in the greater Sao Paulo area. And what we do also for some of the larger firms is if they're bidding on an opportunity overseas, we will help navigate that in terms of helping them, basically navigate in terms of how to best win a bid or a tender with a foreign government. And we're really there to advocate on their behalf. And really, again, our role at the Department of Commerce, we want to increase trade, we want to increase sales for the U.S., and obviously thereby increase jobs. So emerging markets. Here are the resources that we have, which I'm sure are impossible to see right now. So feel free to share them with you. But what is an emerging market? Really, as far as I'm concerned, and many of us as well, is where there really is a great opportunity down the road. I think a lot of companies do get fixated in like a certain number of countries in terms of where those opportunities might lie, but also there could be emerging opportunity in various other developed countries as well, and that could be an emerging market opportunity for a certain product or a service. So really, per the slides, and this is from various analysis, and there's various different types of studies, but 39% of respondents said that it's in relation to its stage of economic development. 28% of companies say it's the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and 27% say it's the BRIC countries plus Indonesia and South Africa. But there are many others. I have a map later on, but there are many other countries in terms of what we consider an emerging market. And it certainly can very much vary really from industry. So for example, we work with a lot of companies that are targeting these various countries. And so one industry, let's say healthcare, it could already be a very saturated, established market within one of those BRIC countries, in which case there isn't really that much of an opportunity. And that's where our offices and others could certainly help you. Or certainly various other industries, depending upon the product or service, there could be a tremendous opportunity. There might be a deregulation in a certain industry. There might be a new focus, a government investment within a certain area. So that could certainly be a great opportunity. So 30% of respondents also say that 30% of global revenues will come from emerging markets by the year 2017. And according to the IMF, emerging markets can expect 2 to 3 times as much growth as developed countries. So I'm going to give some comments on some of these areas in terms of the motivations for investing in emerging markets. And this is, again, per respondents. For 70%, they say it's to gain a foothold in a future market. So obviously that is a great incentive. We were speaking earlier about the opportunities. And this could, for example, I used to work for the World Trade Center Association in Los Angeles and Long Beach. And I was there in the late 90s during the Asian financial crisis, when a lot of companies were pulling out of their investments and their footholds in the Asian region. And actually, one of our counseling strategies to a lot of these companies were, if you could stay in the game for a while, and if you could handle it, then we recommend not only you stay there, but you actually go further invest. Because with so many companies pulling out of the market, really that you would be seen as such a long-term growth strategy that when it does come around, which obviously it did, then you're in a tremendously great position in terms of your network with distributors and foothold in the market. So that's something which, we generally do advise a lot of companies on. And, that certainly could be true right now. There's a lot of political economic volatility in a number of emerging markets, ones that aren't even on the list. But if you could really diversify, then that could be a great opportunity. Obviously, 51% say it's a gain in the greater share of the global market. Obviously, a number of companies that we work with, they really do go after the developed markets first. But emerging markets, it's certainly a great diversification. The customers, a lot of these emerging markets have tremendous middle class, disposable income. So obviously 39% say, they're going after the customer base. And 34% say lack of growth and profit in established markets. So that's really where emerging markets is much more of a risk reward. But if you could diversify and really go after some of these emerging markets now, and frankly, a lot of US companies aren't taking advantage enough of the emerging market opportunities. Again, really to diversify risk. That's even true with the US economy, where, how many of you have been overseas? Okay, great, okay. So how many have watched TV overseas? Like the local show, okay, great, I thought so. So it's interesting when you watch, and there might be a US show that's overseas. And I remember when I was in graduate school, I did an internship at the US Embassy in Brussels. And I was there for 4 months. And the shows that were on really caught me by surprise. In terms of, a couple of them I didn't realize were on the United States. A couple of those shows actually lose money. Back then, they lost money in the United States. But overseas, for whatever reason, because of the culture or whatever it was, that they gained a lot of revenues really from the overseas markets. They're much more popular overseas. And that's true with a number of other companies that we work with here in Massachusetts, where the US economy and even in Europe, developed markets, where they don't do nearly as well. In fact, they might even be losing some money from their investments. But overseas, in a number of markets, they gain so much revenue and so much extra, it really helps to keep them going and actually really furthers their investments. One area that we work with quite closely are actually with the colleges and universities. And so I've worked with Northeastern, and now you have a very robust international student population. It's fantastic in terms of not just the international students, but all the various programs that you have here, not just for the international students, but also for the US students. So when I meet with colleges and universities in terms of their international student recruitment, I am amazed in terms of what some of their top markets are in terms of coming in. It could be Kenya, it could be Bangladesh, it could be Bulgaria, it could be a number of other markets that I wouldn't initially think of. And what a lot of these international missions officers tell me is that what these international students bring, it helps them so much in terms of recruiting other US students and other international students. And it really, it helps a lot in terms of their growth in a lot of different areas. And for 24%, they say make the most of short-term growth and profit. Obviously, emerging markets, they can certainly change very quickly, so that's why it's very good in terms of diversifying. There might be a great opportunity right now in some emerging markets, but maybe in those markets, maybe some economically or politically could happen, and that's why it's really important to go ahead and diversify. But a lot of companies use that as a great springboard in terms of immediate growth potential. But if you can, with that being said, the caveat is really to have a long-term growth strategy. And certainly for all of you that have traveled overseas or from overseas, something that we keep on telling to US companies that we do meet with, especially those that haven't really ventured overseas too much, is that when you go overseas, it's extremely important in terms of building trust in the relationship, in terms of your distributor or other partner, and it takes a lot longer, certainly, than doing business here in the United States or doing business in Europe or Australia, that you really need to go ahead and have that long-term strategy, and then the benefits will certainly be reaped. Lowering costs, certainly, especially, this is not necessarily our area, but in terms of importing, a lot of companies do see the lower costs involved in terms of bringing products in, and 14% in terms of following their competitors. And this is another area where a number of US companies don't really focus on too much, but that they want to follow their competitors. And there's a lot of information to be gained from looking at even a company website in terms of where their partners are, like where their offices are. But the key is to do your own research and to find out like where are the opportunities before your competitors get there. And that's definitely the key. There's one company that I work with. What they do is that when they travel overseas, they sell some products for various grocery stores. And what they do is they go overseas really on their own. And they'll go to the various markets and they'll see what's being shelved and not. They do primary research. And then based upon what they see in terms of what customers are buying, then they will ask the stores, okay, which distributors are you working with? And then that's how they will go ahead, and they will go ahead and contact those distributors. And that's how they'll get a good foothold in the market. So this is from a study in terms of the top emerging markets, 2012 to 2017. I'll spend a little time on this slide. Just going really left to right, Mexico is one of those markets that is frankly very much overlooked, I think, especially here in the Northeast. When I was in Los Angeles, it was a different story, certainly, but it's a great market in terms of emerging area, and establishing a foothold in Latin America, there's tremendous opportunities. Obviously, Brazil can be a very complicated market. There's a number of higher tariffs and some other a number of regulations where companies really do need to understand, and that's where offices could certainly help. But there's tremendous opportunities in Brazil. Argentina, that's certainly another emerging market. One area that we do recommend, instead of just going after only the emerging markets, but also, some neighboring markets as well. So obviously for Mexico being part of NAFTA, tremendous good opportunity. We've obviously had some relatively recent free trade agreements with other Latin American countries, so Colombia, and Peru, Panama, Chile. So if you want to go after like a Brazil and Argentina, you may want to also think about the free trade agreement markets to get a foothold in a Chile or a Colombia or a Peru. And then that way you get a better sense of the market, and then from there you could go ahead and go after maybe a Brazil and Argentina. South Africa, that's a great market. Relatively from what we've seen, fewer companies than what we would like are going after the opportunities in Africa, the African continent as a whole. So getting a foothold in South Africa can be a great opportunity strategically in terms of especially sub-Saharan Africa. Tremendous opportunities, great growth potential. A lot of other markets are there. So for the U.S., relatively, we don't have nearly as much in terms of companies investing into that region. Going up now to Turkey, that can also be another great opportunity. Obviously, between Europe and Asia, it's a great market. It's a very diverse market in terms of trying to find out about your product or service, but it's a great foothold for the region. There's Russia, and for Russia, obviously you need to follow the latest in terms of export regulations. Working down for China, that's obviously tremendously abundant market. One area that we see is tremendous growth, not just in the Beijings or the Shanghais or the Guangzhous, but also the second and third tier cities, where still not as many U.S. companies are going after, but still they have millions and millions of people. And that's actually our largest staff is in China. So we have 14 satellite offices throughout China, and that's certainly an area where we recommend in terms of having local partners, and we can certainly help you with that. Vietnam, it's a great market, and also India. Huge middle class, disposable income, and then just working down to Indonesia. I did a temporary assignment in Indonesia for 2 weeks. It's a great market. Everyone I met there is extremely interested in doing business in the United States across industries. There are others certainly in this region, which I would recommend, which aren't on the list. But there's Thailand, there's Malaysia, and there are many other markets within the area. The other area too that we've talked to companies about is the negotiations with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and also TTIP, Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership with Europe. But the Trans-Pacific Partnership, when you're looking at emerging markets, the countries that are on the negotiating table like a Singapore, like a Japan, and a lot of these other markets that are in the region, it's a great time for companies to get into the region, because if that agreement does go through, you're already in the region. You have a huge leg up on your competitors. You would have already established a great foothold with distributors and other partnerships on the ground, and versus, so you will be ahead of the game in terms of versus your competition. Here's a BRIC fact sheet. I'm not going to go through it. It has a lot of figures just in terms of the BRIC markets, just out of interest of time. And just, it really, again, just goes to the industry. So, for example, the top emerging markets for online media companies are China, India, Russia, and Mexico. So obviously that doesn't follow the list in terms of the map I just had, but it really does depend upon your industry, on your product, on your service, what is really the growth potential within those areas. And it could be a market that is even a developed market. It could be, to me, I consider that emerging market opportunity is that there might be a new deregulation in a developed country for your product or for your service, and that could be a great opportunity for you to go ahead and follow in terms of companies. And so this is, so that's the emerging markets. Does anybody have any questions before I go on to our services? And yes? The what? Oh, yeah, so the various percentages, yeah. Is there any market that you have of, oh, it was basically, yeah, that's a great question. I failed to mention it. But basically, in terms of the respondents, the company respondents, that they considered these markets as a top 5 emerging market. Yeah, so a great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll move on to our services. And now, so now I'll make a little bit of a plug before I do so. That is, in our office, we typically have about 3 interns, and they conduct a lot of market research. They go with us on company meetings, go to a lot of international trade events, and they really help us quite a bit. And so we have a rotating internship with the Northeastern Co-op program, and it's really been fantastic. So a number of our interns have done a lot of this market research for companies. But one of the areas that we do help a lot of companies is obviously in terms of market research. And this market research, which is listed on here, it's done by our colleagues overseas. So in market, at the embassies, at the consulates. And one of the guides, and this is on our website, which you'll see on the last slide, which has my contact details, but it's export.gov is our website where anyone can access this research. But a country commercial guide is basically a guide to doing business in a certain market, and it has about 12 to 13 different sections in it. And one of the sections is on what are the top industries for growth within this country. So let's say Turkey. So they would list really the top 5 to 10 industries in terms of projected growth for that industry over the next 3 to 5 years. And they'll give some snippets in terms of why that industry sees great growth potential. It could be a new deregulation, it could be a growth in middle class, it could be a new focus in area investment from that foreign government. So that's a great resource. We also have a lot of market research reports, so for healthcare, energy, ICT, it could be any industry. So companies could go into our website and look and seek out these reports, and they've used that as a basis in terms of picking which are the top markets, and they could be emerging markets certainly as well. We also do customized market research for companies. If they're a medical advice company and they want to know the number of hospital beds within a certain market, then that's the kind of information that we could provide. So I won't get into too many details, but basically U.S. Congress mandates that we charge nominal fees for customized projects for a company, and that's one of those areas that we charge a nominal fee. And really what we do is we assist companies with counseling, so a lot of our interns will join us in a number of these meetings with companies in terms of trying to evaluate which, if they're trying to look at emerging markets, and they, we generally recommend maybe you want to look anywhere from 1 to 3 markets in terms, because a number of times companies will try to tackle too many at once, and they just don't have the resources. And they certainly might, which is great, but they got to have the resources to invest the time to go to the market, to meet the people in country, develop that relationship, and the most important area is follow-up. And really, a lot of companies don't do enough in terms of the area of follow-up. So we will go ahead and we will advise them really at any stage of the process in terms of which are the best markets and really how to tackle those markets. And we have a number of services where we'll help companies, arrange appointments for them with prospective partners in country or maybe the foreign governments. And then we will, when they travel overseas, we will escort them around. We'll make introductions for them in country. And we have a lot of various types of services to go ahead and do that. We work a lot on trade missions. One area that we had worked very closely with Governor Patrick's office is on his trade missions. So I was fortunate enough to go on a couple of his trade missions overseas. So we facilitate a lot from the governor's office and the state house, state senators, state reps who are going overseas, and certainly various other organizations here in Massachusetts, New England, the U.S., in terms of we'll help arrange trade missions on the other end in country from our colleagues at the embassies and the consulates. And we will do a lot of matchmaking. So we'll help companies meet best prospective partners overseas, whether it's on a trade mission or also at various different types of trade shows as well, and also U.S. trade shows. So a lot of my colleagues will bring a lot of delegations of foreign buyers or foreign distributors to various U.S. trade shows, and we'll help them arrange appointments there too. And really, this is my main last slide because I want to leave some time for questions. But we have a very collaborative environment here in Massachusetts. We're very fortunate. So right in my office is my colleague from the U.S. Small Business Administration, where he handles export finance programs. They'll help companies in terms of navigate export financing. So that way there's greater options in terms of working with a foreign buyer and greater protection from the United States and making sure that they're being paid. So he covers all of New England, but he's based right here in Boston, and he has counterparts throughout the United States as well. The Massachusetts Export Center, they're a fantastic resource. We work very closely with them. They have a lot of excellent international trade events throughout the year, and they work with companies, small, medium, and large. In general, they help a lot more hands-on in terms of companies really just kind of getting started. And then we come in, they'll refer them to us when companies want on-the-ground assistance in country from the embassies and the consulates. We also work very closely with the Massachusetts Office of International Trade and Investment. That's the office that coordinates the governor's trade missions, but also in foreign investment into Massachusetts, and they also handle a lot of the delegations coming through from overseas. So overseas business leaders, political leaders coming from those markets, and we work very closely together, each of these three, and there's many others to our list in terms of associations and other partners that we do collaborate with very closely. And that is it. But I wanted to leave some time for questions, really any part of my presentation or anything else. So thank you. Thanks. Great. Yes. Oh, okay. So a trade mission, so in essence, a trade mission is various forms. So essentially what it is, it's companies, in our case, from Massachusetts or other parts of the United States who are going overseas in order to increase their sales, their growth opportunities. So I'll give you an example. One of my colleagues in our Boston office, she's very involved with the healthcare industry. And so she works with a lot of partners, a lot of companies in that area. So for the United States, she coordinated a medical device trade mission to Turkey, where she led about 25 different companies to Turkey. And so each of those medical device companies, there were a couple in Massachusetts, but really scattered across the United States. And so she led them over there. And so they went to Istanbul, they went to Ankara, I forget, they might have gone to Izmir. And over on the other end, our colleagues at the embassies and at the embassy in Ankara and the consulates in Izmir and Istanbul, they arranged appointments with Turkish distributors and other partners who want to meet with these U.S. companies. And so they met, and then they were hoping to basically build relationships where those distributors and other partners would end up hopefully signing an agreement or buying some of these products. And so that's really the main area in terms of a trade mission. Sometimes they'll go over for a trade show, let's say in Istanbul, where we will help them at the trade show, again, introduce them to foreign partners, buyers who might be interested in their products or services. And a lot of times the other elements are really some networking receptions. So maybe the U.S. ambassador's residence in Ankara or the consulate in Istanbul, that will have various types of nice receptions, and a lot of the Turkish government will come, distributors will come, industry associations from Turkey will come. So it's really a way to really build relationships and hopefully future sales for the companies. A great question. Thank you.
You briefly touched upon President Obama's initiative to increase exports. Can you just expand on that a little bit and what you guys are doing to meet that?
Sure. So the National Export Initiative, it was announced in his first Day of the Union address. And so it was basically to double U.S. exports within a 5-year period. Our agency was really, I could be biased, but really, our agency was really on the front lines of that. The reason why is because our agency does have local offices throughout the U.S. So we have offices that cover all 50 states. And one of the main areas is to really help with our own coordination of various resources. So with different government agencies, so the Small Business Administration, the Export-Import Bank, there's lots of other U.S. government agencies, Trade Development Agency, but also on the state level. We were already here in Massachusetts working very close with all the state trade offices, as I mentioned on the earlier slide. But for us, one of the main benefits of that, and one of our jobs, was really to educate companies on the opportunities in terms of trade and what all the resources are. And so there was tremendous growth from the National Export Initiative as well. Yeah, great. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
Are there any instances in which you have had to exit a market, or how do you hedge volatility in terms of economic instability or political volatility?
That's a great question. There is an agency, a government agency that does help with that in terms of, I don't know if everyone else could hear the question, but basically, like how do you handle economic or political volatility within a country? And so one of the areas that we do educate companies on is that there's the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which basically has an insurance policy, especially in terms of the political, like any political type of unrest. It could be war, it could be terrorism, it could be something else. And they basically have an insurance policy against that. So we certainly do recommend that. Also, other export financing, so if they have deals in the works, Small Business Administration, Export-Import Bank, that they have programs where the U.S. government will back the sales up to make sure that U.S. companies are getting paid. The other area, too, is it's really to understand the market and to have a foothold there. So depends on the situation, but sometimes it could be a temporary situation, in which case a lot of times U.S. companies do want, very understandably, it's only to pull out their employees out of the market. But a number of times we'll basically suggest they want to keep their relationships going, because it might be a temporary, when everyone else is pulling out of the market, they're still there. And so that way when it comes back to being a great prospect, then they're still there, and all their counterpart, their partners within that country will see that. It's a long-term strategy, so it can be a good opportunity. But that's why it's so important also to diversify and make sure that these companies don't have all their eggs in one basket. I had worked with, I'd worked for a small import-export company after grad school. And so one of our main markets was Mexico. And, unfortunately, that was when the peso got devalued. And so what happened, it had a huge impact on our company. In fact, I wasn't sure if our company would be able to survive that. But they had so much sales in Mexico. And it wasn't just, it happens in a lot of markets, but we didn't diversify enough. A great question. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. My question pertains really to the structure of what type of multilateral agreements there might be between different federal agencies, and more specifically, working with other foreign trade agencies. Is there what level of reciprocity, or is there any type of symbiotic benefit that you're working with other countries who are trying to encourage their own trade internally or foreign trade into the United States, and how that works? Or if there is that level.
And it happens, and that's a great, another great question. That happens on various levels. Certainly our foreign governments within country. So my counterparts at the embassies, at the consulates, they obviously meet with the foreign governments quite a bit, and they will try to facilitate trade at that level. I could tell you here in Massachusetts, we have a fantastic relationship here with the foreign consulates, the binational chambers of commerce. Just to give you a few examples, actually last week I met with the Turkish consulate and their economic attaché. We work very closely with the Malaysian consulate here and their trade office, the UK, Germany, France. The list goes on and on. And so obviously their interest here in Boston is to really facilitate trade, their own manufacturers from their home markets into the United States. So they're here, for example, Turkey, to help out their manufacturers, penetrate the Newland market and increase sales here. But we also work very closely with them in terms of we want to just increase trade and collaboration. So if they have a company, if they have a delegation of IT companies coming over here, then we want to provide as many contacts for them as well, because we just want to be helpful. And because then it goes the other way too. For example, when my colleague went over to Turkey, she got a lot of contacts here from the Turkish consulate in terms of over there. So we really, really all the consulates, all the binational chambers of commerce. Binational Chamber of Commerce, for example, we work closely with the French Chamber of Commerce in New England, the UK Trade Investment, and also the British American Business Council in New England. All these different groups, whatever they might need, if it's import related, we will go ahead and help them. So it's very important on a local level, but definitely it really comes from the top as well. But it's a great resource. Okay, great. Yes. Oh, sorry. That's a great question. Also because, and that's probably why it's good to diversify. You certainly can, you really want to follow as much as you can what's happening economically, politically within that market, like their own investments that the government might be making as well. It's still, even the experts don't know. But that's why it's important to go ahead and certainly diversify as much as you can. Just to give you an example, again, when I was with the World Trade Center Association in Los Angeles, Long Beach, so now this is, okay, now I'm really dating myself, about 15, 20 years ago. But, for a lot of those markets within Asia, they were seen as tremendous growth potentials. And a lot of people that I knew were studying those languages and really delving into those areas. You kind of never know. And a lot of those markets have come back again. But, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. It can be, some of those are easier to predict than others in terms of how long they've been in an emerging market and what's really happening economically and politically. It's important to do your research on that. But definitely diversification, not just in terms of a region, but really in terms of worldwide as well. Because then it has a trickle effect. If something happens, for example, in South America, it will have more of an effect on Brazil and Argentina than obviously other parts of the world.
Okay, I think we have like time for one more question, if anyone else had one.
Well, thanks, Jim. My last question is, I wonder if you have any advice in particular for students who are seeking to pursue, business careers in their non-native emerging markets, right? If they're, how should they be developing their mindsets, their skill sets while here at Northeastern to prepare for some of the extraordinary opportunities that you talked about?
I would definitely recommend, because we do talk to students quite a bit, the events like this are fantastic. I frankly wish I had these kinds of opportunities when I was going through school. But really just trying to network as much as you can, internships, obviously study abroad opportunities, to work with foreign companies, to really, from a job perspective as well, one thing I do tell students is, having the overseas experience is critical. Because I do job hiring for our office, and what I could tell you is that one of the things I look at on a resume is international experience. Obviously, it directly relates to our job. There's no question about that. And that could be huge. But in terms of an international student, if they've been studying here, or a U.S. student, if they've done an internship or they've studied overseas, that says a lot about a student. Because, as you know, obviously when you are overseas, it takes a certain kind of person to be able to adjust to a different lifestyle, to a culture, and there's certain flexibility. You need to adapt. You need to have a sense of humor when things happen, and it says a lot about a person. I think not just in terms of job-wise, in terms of building up the international education and experience, but also just in terms of your own independence and confidence. It says a lot about a student. So I would definitely just keep on exposing yourselves to various events, to internships, talk to as many people as you can about it. I find that a lot of people are very approachable, whether it's the government or trade associations or even companies. So, okay, great. So I know my time's up, so I just want to thank you all for the great questions too. Thank you.